Hello, and welcome to Excel 2016. In previous lessons, we talked about the basic utilization of Excel, basic setup, injecting content, simple formulas and functions. In these next couple of lessons, we're going to be talking about design. And not just from a visual perspective, but functional design as well. How to organize content and group it together in a way that makes the data easily readable and manipulatable. First things first though, it looks like we're missing a column. So let's fix that real quick. Now, in previous versions of Excel, we might have had to build a whole function in order to build this out. We know that the email scheme is firstname.lastname@pairco.com. So I'm going to go ahead and type that out here for Sarah Kling. Firstname.lastname@pairco.com. Boom. Pretty easy. Automatically hyperlinks it, all that fun stuff. It's great. However, now I've got to do it for every single person on this list, and that's a lot of people. Doesn't that feel like a really tedious thing to have to do? Instead, let me show you a new tool that's been introduced in 2013 and now has made the leap to 2016 as well. I'm going to go ahead and keep on with this original pattern, firstname.lastname@pairco.com. For Sean Willis, I'm going to go ahead and just start typing Sean, and check this out. Excel actually identified the pattern as I was typing it. I repeated the pattern one time, and it immediately made the assumption that I was going to be replicating it all the way down the column. And it was right. I can now tap the Enter key, and it will automatically fill in all of those values for me. This is called Flash Fill, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's one of those things that once you know it exists, you can never go back. Go ahead and try that for yourself. In the first cell, go ahead and type in firstname.lastname@pairco.com. And then, once that's been up and running, go into the next cell and begin to replicate and watch Excel go to work. Go ahead and try that and then come back. So let's take a look at what we've done here. As we're scrolling down the dataset, you can see that we've completed the last remaining empty column. What we've now done is we've actually created a well-formed list. What does that mean, well-formed list? Because it's not just an aesthetic thing. A well-formed list is content that's grouped together in near proximity with no fully blank rows or fully blank columns that allows us to manipulate all of the data all at once without having to highlight it. Let me give you an example. Go ahead and place your cursor anywhere inside the department column. In years past, if we wanted to sort the department column, we'd have to highlight the entire data set first. And in fact, many of you are still under the impression that you have to highlight everything in order to sort it. It turns out you haven't had to do that in quite some time. In 2007, when Microsoft introduced well-formed lists, they didn't really tell anybody. So let's take a look. Having placed our cursor inside the department column, we're going to need to find our sort tools. Now, our sort tools can be found here on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter dropdown. But for the purposes of this class, we're actually going to go to the Home location of the Sort and Filter tools here inside the Data tab. So go ahead and find that Sort and Filter command group and give that A to Z button a click. This is going to sort the list set from A to Z. And check it out. Not only did it sort this entire department column, but it actually sorted the entire data set, despite the fact that we didn't highlight anything. We just placed our cursor inside the department column, the column that we wanted sorted. It maintains the record horizontally when there's a well-formed list. Once again, well-formed lists are only any mass data set that's close together in proximity with no fully blank rows or fully blank columns. Let's try it with the division column. Go ahead and place your cursor inside the division column, and once again, go ahead and press A to Z. And there you go. Just like that, it sorted the division column, and it sorted the entire dataset along with it, once again, maintaining the horizontal record. Go ahead and try that for yourself, and then come back. So there you go. Because we had a well-formed list set up here, we didn't have to highlight the dataset in order to sort it. All we had to do was place our cursor inside the column, sort it, and the entire dataset followed. And that was because of that well-formed list setup. However, let's say I introduced a fully blank column into the mix. Here now column F is completely empty. What were to happen if I placed my cursor here in the last name column and tried to sort that way? You'll notice that this side of the dataset sorted. However, this side did not. The reason being is these are now two separate well-formed lists because of this fully blank column. So it's important to keep that in mind as we're going throughout this process here, because fully blank rows and columns will make things difficult for you when it comes to trying to organize things. Now that we've seen we can use single level sorting, meaning we just sort by one column value or another, let's say I want to go a bit further. I've sorted by the division column, but now within each division, I'd like to organize based on last name. I'd like to just sort the employees by last name. As you can see here, that's not really the case right now. Here in Connecticut, we've got Colbert and Chen. Already we're off to a terrible start. And then Rich, and then Cafaro, and then Abel. But if I were to just place my cursor in the last name column and click A to Z, why wouldn't that work? Well, because I'd lose my sort in the division column. In order to compound sort, I'm going to need to turn to my big sort tool, found here in the sort and filter bar. Now, cursor placement doesn't matter here when we're using the big sort. So go ahead and just click the big sort button. And you're going to get this box. For my Excel veterans, this is a pretty familiar view. This used to be the only way that you could sort within a dataset. Now we see that we've got our current sort already in place. We're sorting based on division, based on the values of the cells, alphabetically. Okay. But now I'd like to tell Excel to hold on to this sort and add an additional level of sort within that. So let's go ahead and click that Add Level button to add an additional level of sort. Now that I've added that additional level of sort, I'm going to go ahead and dictate what that then by will be. You'll notice now it no longer says sort by, it says then by, indicating that we are going to have one dominant level of sort, division. Our then by will be the last name field, meaning that each division will have its own organized list of last names, based on the values of the cells, alphabetically. Go ahead and click OK to lock it in, and there you go. We're now sorted in division, but within each division, we are now organized by last name. Pretty cool. Go ahead and take this opportunity to pause the video and try this for yourself. Let's take a look at another list set here. Here in this particular data set, I've got a list of names still, but this time I've also got days off. So let's say I'd like to organize these individuals based on their day off. So I'm going to place my cursor inside the column just like I did before, and I'm going to click that A to Z button. Oof. What's wrong with this? What did it do? The expectation was that when I clicked that A to Z button, it was going to sort the days of the week based on the order of the days of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but it didn't. Instead, what did it do? It sorted it alphabetically. But no one, and I mean no one, orders the days of the week alphabetically. So how do we get Excel to look at these days of the week the same way we do? Interestingly enough, Excel doesn't really know that Sunday comes before Monday comes before Tuesday. We actually have to tell it. In order to tell it, we're going to need to jump into our big sort tool. So go ahead and find the big sort tool and give it a click. Once again, we get our big sort tool, and we see here that the sort we initiated is still there. Day off, based on the values of the cells, alphabetically. So where did we go wrong? The order. So I'm just going to click on that, and surely there will be an easy option, right? Well, not so much. I see A to Z, Z to A, but neither of those are going to do it for me. There's only one option left, and it's Custom List. Go ahead and click on Custom List. you're going to get this box right here. This is a list that's pre-made by Microsoft. It's got the abbreviated days of the week, the fully spelled out, the abbreviated months of the year, and the fully spelled out. Excel actually has to be told that this is the order of certain things. And in fact, you can tell Excel to create its own order of other things. In this case, however, we've already got what we need, the fully spelled out days of the week. It's important to note that if you don't choose the fully spelled out one in this instance right here, and you try to use the abbreviated, it's not going to work. Because Excel doesn't know that sun means Sunday, or that mon means Monday. So you have to ensure that the custom list you're choosing matches the content you're trying to organize. Having selected that custom list, I'm going to click OK. Day off, based on the values of the cells, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and I'm going to click OK. And there you go. The days off are now organized based on an actual order. Go ahead and try that for yourself. Once again, the way we got there was by going to the Big Sort tool and changing the order to a custom list. We then selected the fully spelled out days of the week, clicked OK, and locked it in one more time by clicking OK. Go ahead and try that for yourself, and then come back. So there you go. You see that we were able to use sorting in order to organize this data in a way that makes sense to us. This enables us to find data more easily. For example, if I'm trying to find somebody whose day off is on Wednesday, I now have an expectation that they will be somewhere in the middle because I know the order of the days of the week. Now, with that having been said, sometimes sorting just isn't enough. It's nice that we were able to organize things a little bit more so, but like with Wednesday, if I'm trying to find an individual here, I still have to go and scroll through all of this content that I don't need. It would be nice if I could just hide all of that information until I actually needed that information. And that's where a tool called filtering comes into play. Filtering is an incredibly powerful tool that allows us to give specific conditions for content that should or shouldn't be visible. In order to work with filtering, we're going to need to actually turn the filter tool on. This can be found inside the Data tab, inside the Sort and Filter command group. Find the big button that says Filter, and ensuring that your cursor is somewhere inside the dataset, give it a click. Just like that, the drop-down arrows appear in each individual column. Notice we didn't have to highlight the entire dataset in order to turn filtering on. Yet again, because we had that well-formed list set up, we didn't have to. It knew that we were trying to enact change across this entire dataset. And so, by just having our cursor inside of it, it allowed us to implement filtering across the entire set. With these little arrows having appeared, we now have some options available that weren't available before. Let's say, for example, I'm trying to find all the individuals who work in my development department. Well, first things first, I have to identify which of these columns contains the development value. And I see that it's here, the department column. So I'm going to use the drop-down arrow specific to the department column. And I'm going to get this view, which provides some basic sorting tools. But down here at the bottom is where we're really going to be focused. Each individual checkbox represents a unique value inside the column. So we can see here that there are 4 separate unique values inside the department column: development, research, sales, and staff. All of them are currently checkboxed, meaning all of them are currently visible. So if I'd like to have it set so that I only see development, I'm going to need to deselect all of them and reselect development. Having done that, I'm now going to click OK. And just like that, a lot of things have happened, so let's break this down. The first thing you'll notice is that the drop-down arrow now has a filter icon. Additionally, you'll notice that the row numbers have changed a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 8. I'm no mathematician, but I'm fairly confident that that's not the numbers that were there before. You'll also notice that from 8 down to 50 here, they're all colored in blue, indicating that these are rows we filtered for. We asked for these. If you're seeing a record inside of this field that you didn't ask for, you need to check your parameters to make sure you're filtering for the appropriate data. Last indication that we're filtering is in the status bar. We are currently looking at 24 of 94 records. Not bad. Go ahead and try that for yourself. Once again, the way we got to this point was by turning on the filter tool, which can be found here inside the Data tab. Next, we clicked on the drop-down arrow in the column that we'd like to filter. And lastly, we selected the value we wanted to see and deselected all the ones we wanted hidden. Go ahead and try that for yourself and then come back. So that was one level of filtering, and that's great. But now I'm left with all this information still. Now, I'm looking inside the development department, but let's say the individual I know for sure works in Connecticut. I'd like to filter this down so that I'm only seeing people who work in the Connecticut development department. Can I do that? Can I possibly filter from multiple columns at the same time? Absolutely you can. Go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow in Division, and in the same process, we're going to deselect all and reselect Connecticut, and click OK. So now I'm down to 2 filter fields. What I'd like to do now is just organize the existing individuals. What's the best way to organize any list set of names? Well, by last name. Can I sort while I'm filtering? Sure. By clicking on the last name dropdown, you can use the sort A to Z or Z to A tools. However, don't let this stop you from using the tools up here as well. This is simply a convenient location for them. You still have access to all the same tools that we've talked about in the past. Go ahead and sort the last name alphabetically. And there you go. You've now filtered by 2 distinct columns and then sorted a third. This is called multi-level filtering, and it allows you to find specific values even when there's 94 records. Pretty cool. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up with me. Once again, we sorted by last name, filtered for Connecticut in the division column, and filtered for development in the department column. Go ahead and try that and then come back. There's a lot of filtering going on. When you're done filtering and you'd like to bring back the original dataset, it's really easy. Jump into the Data tab and find the Clear button. This will clear all existing filters in the entire worksheet. You can also clear individual filters by clicking on their individual drop-down arrows and selecting the Clear Filter button. Using either of these methods, go ahead and clear all of the existing filters. Now, it was great that we were able to filter for specific values, but we're not always going to be so lucky as to search for very specific things. Sometimes we're looking for more of a range of things. For example, here in the benefits column, let's say I'd like to find all employees who have retirement benefits. Now, given the way this column is set up, retirement can be mixed in with dental and health insurance as well. So I'd like to find all instances of retirement without having to go and specifically select every single checkbox that has an R in it. How can I do that? Well, instead of checking the boxes, what I can do is use the search box to search for a specific value inside of a cell, meaning that if any cell even kind of meets that criteria, it will bubble it up for me. So here in this search box in the benefits column, I'm going to filter for the letter R. And you'll see that it automatically finds all of the unique values that contain the letter R. From here, all I have to do is click OK. I didn't even have to check the boxes. By typing in the box, it checks them for me and clicks OK. There you go. I'm down to 49 of 94 records. So these are all my employees that have retirement benefits. What I'd like to do now is find all employees who work less than 35 hours, because I'd like to let them know they are now eligible for additional retirement benefits that otherwise were only previously available to full-time employees. Now, how do I find individuals who work less than 35 hours? Because there's quite a few individuals. Are we really going to go through and individually checkbox every single value that's less than 35? No, that would be too much work. Instead, we're going to filter for a specific range using the Number Filters tool. Once again, this is inside the Hours column, and it's called Numbers Filters. Go ahead and find that Number Filters tool, and which one of these do you think we're probably going to use? We're trying to find all employees who work less than 35 hours. Here we go, less than. Go ahead and find less than and give it a click. And we see here the custom autofilter box where we can dictate what rows get shown based on certain conditions. In this case, we want to show rows where hours are less than 35. Go ahead and do that and click OK. And just like that, we're down to 11 of 94 records. Not bad. And we did all of that searching for parts of a cell, not necessarily specific values. Just like in other instances, we can now sort. So if I were to sort by hourly rate now, from smallest to largest, boom. There you go. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try this for yourself. Once again, we searched inside the benefits column using the search bar for the letter R, indicating retirement benefits. We then filtered using the Numbers Filters tool to search for individuals who work less than 35 hours. And lastly, we sorted the hourly rate column from smallest to largest. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try that, and then come back. Good. Let's go ahead and clear that filtering. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off the filter tool by turning off the toggle we turned on previously. Now that we've talked a little bit about sorting and filtering, it's great that we were able to do all of that, and in fact, it was really made possible because of that well-formed list we talked about. Well-formed lists are great. However, there are additional tools out there that allow us to work with this data, manipulate it, sort it, and filter it in a more simplified manner. It's not to say that there are better versions of these tools, but they're easier to use in some circumstances when we've organized this data set in a more structured way. I'm talking about tables. Now, I know the confusion that arises here in these situations. Tables? Surely this is a table. It looks just like the tables we insert inside of Microsoft Word documents, right? Well, it's not a table yet. It's just a list. A well-formed list, but just a list. So with that having been said, we need to make it a table. Now, the determination between what is and is not a table is based on one single criteria inside of Excel. We have to tell it it's a table. That's it. So let's do that. Placing your cursor anywhere inside the dataset, find the Insert tab at the top. Here inside the Insert tab, you'll see a series of options beneath inside the Tables command group. We've got Pivot Table, which we'll be talking about later. Recommended Pivot Tables, still talking about it later. And Tables. We're going to go ahead and use that one. So once again, ensure your cursor is somewhere inside the dataset and give that Table button a click. You'll notice that it automatically highlights everything. This is one last time because this is a well-formed list. We didn't have to highlight everything. Excel knew we were trying to enact change to the entire dataset. Having ensured that everything is selected, we're going to go ahead and verify that our table has headers, in this case num, first, last, employee ID, and so on. Our table does have headers, so we're going to leave that box checked and click OK. And just like that, we now have a table, complete with a set of tools that weren't available before. The Table Tools Design tab. This is an example of a contextual tool tab that only appears when we're in an environment that requires it. Notice what happens when I click away from the table. I'm going to click away, and you'll see that the Table Tools Design tab disappears. I'm now going to click back inside the table, and you'll see that that tab appears. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up with me. Once again, the way we got to this point was by navigating to the Insert tab ensuring that our cursor was somewhere inside the dataset, and then clicking the Table button. Once you've verified that all of the data has been selected, click OK, and there you go. Go ahead and try that and catch up. Welcome back. So we've formatted this as a table. Let's take a look at some of the tools that are made available when we format as a table. First things first, you'll notice that we have filter drop-down arrows yet again. So it's nice to know that those automatically come with it. Of course, we don't have to use those. Inside the Table Tools Design tab, you'll notice that we have a series of checkboxes. We can actually turn off the filters if we want to. Simply uncheck the box. Now, as we're going through this, there's a lot of really cool things that can be done with these tables. And you'll notice that many of them aren't necessarily exclusive to tables, they're just more consolidated. Table styles is one thing that's unique to tables. It's the ability to change the visual aspect of everything inside the dataset instantly. By expanding on the Table Styles dropdown in the bottom right corner, you'll see that we have a series of visual options. By hovering over them, you'll get a live preview of what these styles might look like. In this case here, I'm digging the orange. I think I'm going for orange this time around. Once you find a style that you like, simply click to lock it in. To the left, as we've seen, there are some checkboxes. If you're not sure what a checkbox does, just uncheck it or check it. The header row does exactly what it seems like it's going to do. It turns off or on the header row. The first and last column visually indicate that there is significance in either the first or the last column by changing the visual styling. Now, depending on the style you use from the Table Styles menu, it will either bold the text or, alternatively, it will change the filter style, or alternatively, it will change the fill style of each column. So keep that in mind. Banded rows and columns are those alternating rows and columns that we see here. Many people have been doing that manually for as long as they've been using Excel. However, by formatting as a table, you don't need to. Simply check or uncheck the box to turn on banded rows or columns. This is simply for readability. In this case here, however, we're reading the data left to right, so banded rows is a more appropriate one. The last tool that we have in the checkbox is the total row. Notice currently in row 98, there's nothing. However, when I check the total row, suddenly there's a whole new row introduced, and it's automatically summed up the gross pay, the last column. But we're not limited to just this last column. In fact, we can do anything. Let's say we'd like to find the average number of hours worked. I'm going to place my cursor in the total row underneath the hours column, and you'll notice that I get a little drop-down arrow. Simply click on the drop-down arrow, and in this case, I'd like an average. So I'm going to click Average. Boom. The average employee is full-time, working nearly 36 hours. Let's say I'd like the average gross pay. There you go. Maybe I want the max gross pay. Who's getting paid the most? In this case, the highest paid person is getting paid $1,008 versus the smallest, $85. So it's interesting to see how, without typing, because we formatted as a table, using the total row, we were able to do basic arithmetic. Pretty cool. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try out some of those table style options. And then come back. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and turn off that total row now, simply by unchecking. Additional tools available inside the Table Tools Design tab. We have the ability to export our data into Visio or to SharePoint. We also have the ability to summarize with pivot tables, which we'll talk about later. Insert slicers, also coming later. We also have access to the Remove Duplicates tool. Now, it is important to note that the Remove Duplicates tool is also available to well-formed lists. This is not exclusive to tables, but this is a great opportunity to talk about it. When it comes to working with data, there are plenty of instances where we might accidentally have duplicates. Whether it's because we've re-imported the same database multiple times, accidentally copied and pasted one time too many, all these different reasons. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and highlight the bottom 4 rows from 94 to 97. Having selected that data, I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut of Control-C. Of course, you can also use the Home tab Copy button as well. And I'm then going to paste down below by tapping Enter after selecting cell A98, or having used the Paste button. Either one will work. Now, with that having been said, there are plenty of databases where the data is not dead, meaning that we're constantly updating it, whether it's somebody is getting married and their last name has changed, or they have new benefits available, or their hourly rate has changed. With all these examples here, it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about removing duplicates. In this case, Amy's gotten married here at the bottom, and we're super excited for her, despite the fact that we didn't get invited. So we're going to change her last name from Tooley to Smythe. She's married a British lad, and we're really excited for her. Now, with that having been said, there is another Amy Tooley inside this dataset. So let's keep that in mind. Now, let's find that Remove Duplicates tool. We realize that there are duplicates inside the dataset, and we'd like to remove them. So let's find that Remove Duplicates tool, either here in the Table Tools Design tab, or inside the Data tab. This is the same tool, just in a different place. Using either one of those options, go ahead and give it a click, and you're going to get this box right here. Now, these checkboxes represent all the columns in our selected table. Each of these checkboxes indicates to Excel that we want it to check every cell in every single one of these columns for duplicates. If it should find an entire row that matches an entire other row in all of these columns, it's considered a duplicate and must be removed. Let's go ahead and click OK and see what happens. And we see this. 3 duplicate values have been found and removed. But I know that we copied 4. So what happened? Well, if you remember, Amy got married. And thus, her last name changed from Tooley to Smythe. Despite the fact that every other cell is identical in every single way up to and including her employee number, it still didn't consider it a duplicate. So how do we fix that? Well, instead of using the Remove Duplicates tool and searching for every single column, you can isolate it down to a column that only has unique values, or remove any column that might potentially have a different value. In this case here, which of these columns would have a guaranteed unique value? Probably the employee number. So let's deselect all and turn on just employee number. Meaning that if at any point this cell matches any other cell, it'll be considered a duplicate and removed. Let's go ahead and click OK and see what happens. Oh, there it is. So despite the fact that Amy Tooley and Amy Smythe had different last names, we weren't searching those anymore. We were searching for a unique value that should only appear once. Excel found the duplicated employee ID number and removed it. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try that for yourself, and then come back. So that's remove duplicates. Let's go ahead and convert this table back to a range. We're going to go ahead and use the Convert to Range button to do just that. Simply click Convert to Range, and it'll ask you, do you want to convert this table back to a normal range? We're going to click Yes. And this is no longer a table. You'll know it's not a table because no matter where you click, we no longer have access to the Table Tools Design tab. So keep that in mind when you're asking yourself whether or not you are or aren't inside of a table. Go ahead and convert your dataset back to a range, and then come back. There's a lot of different questions that can be answered inside of this data set. For example, how much am I paying my Connecticut division? How many employees do I have that work 35 hours or more? How many of my employees have just dental? But with all of those tools, it's important to note that it's a tedious process that starts with just organizing the data, either by sorting or by filtering. At least until now. Let's go ahead and jump over to this next worksheet here, and taking a look at some of the information we have available here, you can see that we're looking at wine sales. Alright, it's never too early, or late, depending on what time you're watching this video, to talk about wine. Even here, there are plenty of questions that we can ask. One of the simplest, how much did we sell in red versus white wine? Now, to answer that question, previously we might have had to, let's say, filter out all of the white wine sales and just tally up all the red, or vice versa. Or maybe you'd say sort it, and then insert a row between red and white and sum it up there. But all of those are tedious, and the worst part about it is that if you're trying to sum up more than just two different values, in this case red and white, you're talking about spending a good chunk of time doing that. So instead of wasting your time with that, why not let Excel do it for you? So let's do that. Let's let Excel do it for us. The first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to help it out by organizing our data set. So what question are we going to ask? Well, I'd like to find out how much we're selling in red versus white. And I might also want to find out how well we're doing in each particular group of wine as well. So let's sort our data set based on that. If you'll remember, to sort on multiple levels, we're going to need to dive into the Data tab and use that big sort button. Inside the big sort, we're going to sort by type, based on the values of the cells alphabetically. We're then going to add an additional level and sort by group within that. Once again, based on the values of the cells alphabetically. Go ahead and click OK to lock that in. And there you go. So now we've got our type organized by red and white, and our group organized by group. Now, it's important to note that sorting is required when using the tool we're about to use, called the Subtotal tool. This can be found inside the Data tab on the far right-hand side, and you'll see why in just a moment. But essentially what we'd like to do is ask Excel to, based on certain criteria, sum up the total sales based on individual categories of data. Ensuring that your cursor is somewhere inside the data set and it's sorted, let's click on the Subtotal tool. It's a pretty straightforward tool. At each change in a certain value, use a particular function to subtotal a particular column. In this case, our change is going to occur first inside the type column, meaning that when red changes to white, we want Excel to stop. Use the sum function to subtotal what? Not quantity, but sales. So go ahead and uncheck quantity and check sales, and let's click OK. Now a lot's happened here, so let's take a look. On the top left-hand corner, you'll notice that we now have something called grouping buttons. Go ahead and click on Group Level 1. Now, if you ever run into this, it's important to note that you didn't do anything wrong. This simply means that the column isn't wide enough. Simply find the border between the column on the right and the column you're in now, and double-click. Or simply click and drag to resize. Either way will work, but it allows the number to fully fit. So there's our grand total. We sold $45,000 in wine, and we didn't even ask for this. This is just a bonus. That's group level 1. What about group level 2? There's the answer to our question. In red wine, we sold $27,000. And in white, we sold $18,000. Pretty good. It's pretty incredible to see that we were able to pull that information out simply by sorting and then using the subtotal tool. So if 1 gave us the grand total and 2 gave us the breakdown between red and white, what's 3 going to give us? If you said all the details, you'd be absolutely right. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up. Once again, ensure that the column that you're trying to break down by subtotal is sorted. Then, click on the subtotal tool. At each change in that column, use the sum function to subtotal out another column. And then click OK. Go ahead and try that for yourself, and then come back. Welcome back. So we've seen that we were able to answer simple questions like how much we sold in one category versus another with subtotaling. But let's say I'd like more detail. In this case, I'd like to find out within red and white how well we did in each particular group. Fortunately, we had the foresight to organize based on both columns. So we don't have to sort again because it's already sorted, although you should ensure in future instances that you sort ahead of time. Once again, we're going to trigger the subtotal tool. This time, at each change in group, we'd like to use the sum function to calculate the total sales. Now before we click OK, it's important to check out this top checkbox. Replace current subtotals. Meaning that if I click OK with this box checked, it's going to remove my red versus white subtotaling. And I don't really want that. So if you also don't want an existing subtotal to be removed, ensure that you unclick that checkbox. And then click OK. And check it out. We now have 4 grouping levels. 1 still gives us the grand total. 2 still gives us red versus white because we unchecked that checkbox. And now 3, which originally gave us our fully zoomed in view, now gives us our grouping subtotals. So in red, we can see that Red Blend sold $11,772 versus Merlot's paltry $2,250. It's pretty cool to see how much detail we can get out of this simply by sorting and subtotaling. And lastly, Group 4 gives us all the details. Go ahead and try this out for yourself. Once again, we ensured that the list set was sorted, we re-engaged the subtotal tool, and we said at each change in group this time, use the sum function to subtotal out sales, and clicked OK. Once you've had your fun with the subtotaling tool, to remove it, relatively straightforward. Simply find the subtotal button one last time and give it a click. Having triggered the subtotal button, this time we're going to find the Remove All button and click on that. And just like that, we're back to square one. Go ahead and pause the video and remove your subtotals. All right. Now that we've gotten a taste of data analysis, we're starting to crunch numbers. Let's keep going. We saw that subtotaling allowed us to answer basic questions like red versus white. And then we saw we were able to go even further and see blend versus Riesling versus Pinot Noir versus Merlot. What we'd like to do now is talk about other ways that we can analyze data. Let's jump over to this next sheet here. And we'll see that we're looking at sales figures for January of 2015. 5 individual salespeople, 4 separate weeks. Now, there's a lot of things that we can see in this, but one of the things that's really difficult to see is trending data. It's very difficult for me to see how well each person trended week over week. The reason being is we only recognize 10 digits at a time. So when I'm looking at 4,520, I'm reading each individual number one by one. Meaning I have to do that with every single number for each individual cell for each individual person. So I can only really draw one line at a time in my head. And I have to do that 5 other times. So instead of going through that tedious process, why not let Excel do that for us. In fact, why not let Excel do everything for us when it comes to analyzing this entire data set? Go ahead and highlight everything, from salesperson down to week 4. Having selected everything, a little box will pop up called the Quick Analysis tool. Give that Quick Analysis button a click, and you'll see this little box pop up. This gives you 5 different categories of quick analysis: conditional formatting tools, charts, totaling, tables, and Sparklines. We'll be talking about Sparklines and conditional formatting a little bit later. And we've already talked about how we can calculate totals and create tables. So let's talk about charts. Go ahead and click on that Quick Analysis tool and navigate to the Charts section, and you'll see that we have some recommended charts based on the data selected. Excel actually analyzes the data that you highlighted, and it predicts what data chart will make the most sense for visualization. In this case here, as I hover over each one, I get a live preview of what these charts will look like if I were to choose them. Pretty cool. Of course, if you want more, you can always click on More, but in this case, I think I'd like to choose this one, the clustered column chart. I'm going to give that a click to lock it in, and instantly, it's created this chart for me. How cool is that? Go ahead and take this opportunity to quick analyze your dataset and insert a clustered column chart. Once again, we simply highlighted the data, clicked on that Quick Analysis tool, navigated to Charts, and chose the first option. Go ahead and try that and then come back. Now that's not the only thing that Quick Analysis can do. By clicking and dragging down to highlight everything again, I can also use it to calculate totals rapidly. Let's say I'd like a summation of all the week's performances. So, having highlighted everything, I'm going to find the sum and give it a click. Instantly, it's created a summation of each week's performance. Not too bad. Now, that was one way for us to analyze the data, but it's not the only way. In fact, let's go ahead and talk about the other way to insert a data chart. Click on this quick analysis chart that we've created and delete it. We're now going to insert a data chart the standard way. Go ahead and place your cursor anywhere inside this dataset, and we're going to need to jump into the Insert tab here. Here inside the Insert tab, we have access to the Charts command group. The Charts command group is where we have access to our recommended charts, yet again. It's also where we have access to all the other styles of charts that are available. In this case, instead of using one of the recommended chart styles, what I'd like to do is get a line chart analyzing week-over-week trending data. When analyzing over a period of time, line charts are a very effective way of doing that. So find the Line Chart button and give it a click. And we're going to just choose this first option here. Boom. That easy. Just like that, it's automatically identified all of the data, all of the fields, and it's created a line chart for us. Now there's a couple of things wrong with it, and that's okay. Because while it was automated, Excel made some guesses in the process that we may not necessarily agree with. For example, each line, instead of representing a person, currently represents a week. And each individual data point, instead of being the week, represents the salespeople. It's also included the sum, which doesn't serve any purpose inside of this chart. So we're going to need to remove that as well. So let's fix that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of sum, because that's throwing off the entire data set. To remove sum, go ahead and click on the chart. There are 2 ways that we can do this. One, the old-fashioned way, is here inside the Chart Tools Design tab, and it's called Select Data. However, with 2013 and 2016, it's gotten easier than ever to filter out data that you don't need. By simply clicking on the chart, you'll be provided with 3 additional user-friendly options. The most important one right here for this example is the filter button. Give that filter button a click, and you're going to get this pop-up box, which allows us to filter out values that we don't want. By hovering over these individual lines, we can see which line represents which checkbox, but in this case, we're not worried about the line, we're worried about the category sum. So find that sum checkbox and uncheck it, and click Apply. And there you go. Instantly, the data format has reformatted itself. So now the sum doesn't impact the dataset at all. Pretty cool, right? Now, one thing is still pretty messed up about this, however. Weeks should have been the data points, and the lines should be the salespeople. So we're going to need to reverse this. Go ahead and click on the chart once again, and we're going to navigate to the Chart Tools Design tab. If only there was a button that allowed us to switch the row and column data. Wouldn't that be nice? Oh, if only there was a button, just a single button that allowed us to flip-flop the legend and the series. Any guesses where that button might be? Go ahead and find that Switch Row and Column button inside the Chart Tools Design tab and give it a click. That looks much better. And there you go. Each individual data series is now its own little section. And each individual salesperson has their own line. So we can now analyze the trending data of each individual salesperson. Pretty cool. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up with me here. Now, what else can we do with a data chart? Well, we can change other aspects about it. Obviously, it's given us a title here, but maybe I didn't really want a title. In order to add and remove elements, you're going to need to find this Add Remove button here on the right-hand side. If you don't see any of these boxes, make sure you've clicked on the chart. Remember, you're only going to have access to tools if Excel knows you need them. So if you need chart tools, click on the chart. Go ahead and click on that Add Remove Chart Elements button, and you'll see a series of options that are available or already present inside the dataset. In this case here, we don't want a chart title, so I'm going to uncheck that box. And just like that, the chart title's gone. Maybe I do want a chart title, but instead of having it at the very top here, I'd like to have it centered inside the chart. By clicking on this arrow to the right here, I'd have additional options for not just chart title, but all my chart elements. Maybe I'd also like a data table. So I'm going to hover over Data Table, and I'm going to check that box to turn it on. I can definitely see here that this chart title is not going to work in this place, so I'm going to move that back up to above the chart. Do a little bit of landscaping here, so I've got a bit more space. All right, this is coming together. So now I have the whole data table that this chart is based on inside the chart. Maybe I'd also like data labels, labeling each individual line point. That's an option. Maybe I want data labels that are below or above or to the left or right. Keep in mind that we have plenty of available options that allow us to landscape this chart exactly the way we want. In this case here, I'm going to leave everything else the way it is, and I'm going to add a chart title simply by double-clicking inside the box. I think I'll call this chart title January 15 Sales. Cool. The last box we haven't talked about here is this guy right here. So go ahead and click on the little paintbrush. This will allow you to choose from a series of pre-designed template styles for charts. And some of them look pretty good. In most instances, these pre-designed styles will be good enough in tandem with adding and removing elements. However, it is important to note that you have a lot more flexibility than just those pre-formatted options. If you navigate to the Format tab of your Chart Tools tab, you're actually going to be able to format everything about this chart. So let's say I'd like to format the background, the chart area. Simply have chart area selected inside this little drop-down box and select Format Selection. This is going to bring out the Format Chart Area pane, where you can control the fill, border, text options, or even text fill of all of the chart elements. Let's go ahead and change the fill color. In this case, I think I'd like to use a gradient fill. That looks pretty good. Now, of course, you can control other elements about that, like color in each of the gradient stops. You can also choose something other than gradient. Maybe you'd like to use a solid fill color. Oof, maybe not that. You can also insert a picture or choose from a pre-selected field of texture options. Go ahead and pick a fill color. Now, if you'd like to change other elements about this chart, you can. To the right of the chart options, you'll notice there's a little drop-down arrow. Find that drop-down arrow next to chart options and give it a click, and you'll see here that you can change where you're formatting. Maybe we want to change the chart title. Here in chart title, I can change the fill color of that whole box, or I can go to text options and control other elements about it, whether it's text and fill, text effects, or impacting the text box itself. In this case, maybe in text effects, I'd like to implement, tough choices. Let's say, I know, I'm going to give it a custom angle. Just going to cant it off a little bit, a 6-degree angle. Of course, you can also impact text direction or the alignment. Go ahead and take this opportunity to explore some of the style options that you can format. You can also change each individual line color if you would so choose. There's very little about this chart that you can't change, so go ahead and take a few minutes to change the chart into something that you would want to represent your data, and then come back. Once you've got the chart exactly where you want it, you probably want to hold on to that styling forever, right? A lot of us, or at least those of us who work with charts every now and again, are tired of making these same design decisions over and over and over again. So instead of putting ourselves through this every single time we have to build a chart, it would be nice if we could save all of these different design elements and just reapply it every time we need to. Meaning that every time I have a data set, I can just apply this style of chart to it. I don't have to remember what tools I used, what checkboxes I checked, what degree of an angle I gave my chart title. For those of us that would like to reapply these design elements later, we have something called chart templates. Now, if you click inside the Design tab, you'll see that we really don't see anything available here. And in the Format tab, we really don't see anything regarding templates. This is actually a right-click menu only option. If you right-click on the chart, you'll be presented with an option called Save as Template. So once again, go ahead and right-click on your chart and select Save as Template. It's very important that you note you're being placed into a folder that is exactly where you have to save this chart template. Excel won't look anywhere else for your template, so don't navigate out of this. I'm going to go ahead and name this chart Sean's chart. And I'm going to click Save. So just like that, I've taken all the different things that made this chart unique. The background, the data table, the canted title. And I'm now going to go and jump into another worksheet. Here we go. So I've got another worksheet here that I'd like to build a chart on top of, and I want to use the same design elements that I used from the original. So let's go ahead and do that. Placing your cursor somewhere inside this dataset, go ahead and click on the Insert tab. And once you've dived into the Insert tab, we're going to find the Charts section. Once again, I'm going to click on the Insert Line Chart button, but this time, instead of choosing one of the options available here, I'm going to click on More Line Charts. Now where, oh where, is my template? I don't know, maybe the Templates folder? Maybe? Click on the Templates folder and you'll see there it is. There's Sean's chart. So I'm going to give that a click, and I'm going to click OK. Boom! Check it out! It's actually implemented every single design element in this entire dataset. So now my chart looks exactly the way I wanted it to, because I made all of these design decisions previously and then saved it as a chart template. It's now re-implemented itself on entirely new data. All I have to do now is change the chart title. Looks like I might have to invert the row and column data, but boom! Once I do that, this chart is all put together. Pretty cool. So hopefully you're starting to see, not just with chart templates, but with Excel templates, with our theme style templates. All of these different things are designed to offload the decision-making process so that all you have to do is make the decision once and never think about it again. Go ahead and take this opportunity to insert a new line chart using that line chart template that we created earlier, and then come back. Welcome back. So there you go. And now we've got a chart that easily analyzes the data. But let's say I'd like to view this in a different way. Maybe I'd like to change the chart style. This is pretty easy as well. Go ahead and click on the chart and jump into the Design tab with me. It's here inside the Chart Tools Design tab that we can actually change the chart type with a single click. Let's say I'd like to turn this into a column chart. Pretty easy. I'm going to give that option a click and click OK. Cool, there you go. So now I've got a column chart, and honestly, I think this is more of a preferable way to read this kind of data. But let's say I still want to maintain that trending information. I want to see how country music goes from quarter to quarter to quarter to quarter. The same thing with jazz or pop. But I don't want to insert another chart for that. So what options do I have? Well, what I could do is introduce a new tool to you guys that allows us to visualize the trending data without a chart. To do this, first things first, let's go ahead and place our cursor in column F, row 4, and let's title this out Trends. Autofill the formatting over here. I'd now like to insert some trending data. So what tab am I probably going to be in if I'm inserting anything? Probably the Insert tab. Here inside the Insert tab, I'm going to go ahead and find, here's my charts. But all of my charts here are a little bit too graphic-y. That's too much for me. Instead, let's talk about Sparklines. Sparklines are a tool that were introduced in 2010, but there's not been a lot of publicity around them. So this is a great opportunity for me to show you guys what you can do with it. Go ahead and place your cursor in cell F5 now. And let's say we'd just like to visualize country music. We'd like to see how country music was doing between quarter 1 and quarter 4. Having placed our cursor inside the Trends column, I'm going to click on the Line Sparkline. From here, it's a really simple tool. Just choose the data that you want. So I'm going to highlight from quarter 1 to quarter 4, B5 through E5. I've got the location already chosen, cell F5 right here. I'm going to click OK. And check it out. It's created a mini chart inside that cell. So I can see here visually that we start out a little low. We do a little bit better in quarter 2, we drop in quarter 3, and we peak in quarter 4. How cool is that? And of course, if you click on the cell, just like with all the other tools we've talked about today, we have additional tools inside this contextual tool tab, now called the Sparkline Tools Design tab. Here inside the Sparkline Tools Design tab, we can change everything from the sparkline color to the marker color. Now we don't have any markers yet, so let's fix that. Here on the left-hand side, we have the show command group, where I can turn on the high point, which will create a little visual marker indicating the highest point, or the low point, also indicating the lowest point. Or I could have markers for all the data points. It's really up to you. In this case, I'm going to leave it at high and low, and maybe I'd like to change the marker color of the high point to green. Cool. And maybe I'd like to change the sparkline color to black. There's a lot of flexibility in this. Now, once you've gotten everything exactly where you want it, you can also, just like any other cell, function, formula, or otherwise, autofill down. So by autofilling down the sparkline, I now have trending data for all 5 genres in pair records. Pretty cool. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up with me here. Once again, simply place your cursor inside the dataset you'd like trending data for, and then in the Insert tab, find the line sparkline. Select the data you'd like to trend, and click OK. Go ahead and try that and then come back. So there you go. Just like that, we were able to impact everything about this using sparklines, charts. This looks pretty good. And of course, all of this is still subject to themes. Check it out. Go ahead and navigate to the Page Layout tab, click on the drop-down for themes, and see how the chart changes based on your design choices. Font styles, color schemes, everything. You can change the entire look and feel just by changing the theme. If you haven't already, try a different theme maybe, and give it a click to lock it in. Now, once you've gotten comfortable with how things look, let's talk about one of the last things that we need to when it comes to charts: printing it. Printing charts can be a really tedious process, so it's important that you pay attention for this particular part. Are you ready? The first thing we're going to do is click on the chart. From here, I'm going to need you guys to dive into the File menu here at the very top left. So once again, click on the chart. Please ensure that the chart is selected before you click on File. Once you've navigated into the File menu, find the Print button. And there you go. There you go. It's that easy. Just click on the chart, File, Print. Now, of course, you do have access to your same page setup options that we've talked about in earlier lessons, whether it's to change the portrait orientation to landscape, which is a little bit more readable in my opinion, or maybe to change the paper size. Go ahead and play with the settings a little bit, but ensure that you're comfortable. Click on the chart, File, Print, and Print. Go ahead and give that a shot, and then come back. Hello, and welcome to Excel 2016. In previous lessons, we've been talking about design elements. We've talked about basic utilization of Excel tools. From here, we're going to be talking about working with existing data to really impact and analyze. We started to get a taste of that in previous lessons with subtotaling and chart data analysis. But from here, we're really going to start talking number crunching. Now, before we can talk about number crunching, we got to talk about where we get the numbers from. In plenty of instances, we simply have the data. We type it in ourselves manually. But there are going to be plenty of instances where that's not the case. In fact, in a lot of instances, we get our data from external sources, whether it's the web, from emailed reports, from output reports from databases. In all of these instances, we need to know how to bring in that data from external sources. I'd like to talk to you guys about that now. Here inside the Importing Data worksheet, I'd like to bring in some data from the web. Now in this case on the right hand side here, you see I'm trying to convert from pounds to US dollars, but I have no idea what the current exchange rates are. So we're going to need to find somewhere that does. Placing your cursor in cell B3, we're going to need to pull in this data from an external source. Now with a name like importing data, what tab do you think we're probably going to be in? You get one guess. The Data tab. Go ahead and find the Data tab. And on the far left-hand side, we have the Get External Data tool. Once you find the Get External Data tool, you'll see that we have the ability to pull data from Access databases, from the web, from text-based forms and files. We even have the ability to pull it from external sources like the SQL servers, or from even the Azure Marketplace. This is really cool. And in fact, we'll be talking about pulling them from external sources beyond from the web in just a moment. In this case here, however, we're going to pull from the web. Go ahead and find that From Web button and give it a click. You're going to get this pop-up. It's a little miniature version of Internet Explorer. From here, we're going to navigate to the website where we can pull the data from. In this case, I typically pull my exchange rate information from xrates.com. Go ahead and join me. The address is x-rates.com. Please make sure to spell that correctly. Once you've typed that in, go ahead and hit enter. You may get a couple of script errors. Internet Explorer doesn't always play nicely with the internet at large, as you may be aware. Go ahead and click yes if you get that pop-up. From here, the website's loaded, and it loads the same way every website does. But as you scroll down, you might notice these little arrows. These arrows indicate table-based information, and this is incredibly important to remember. Excel can only import data from the web that's built in using table-based formatting. Fortunately, here's our exchange rate information, and there's an arrow indicating that we can import this data. By hovering over the arrow, it will highlight all the selected data that it will be able to import. Give it a click to lock it in, and you'll notice that the arrow turns to a checkbox. Once that's been done, go ahead and click Import. It's now going to ask, where do you want to put the data? In this case, we'd like to import it into this existing worksheet, although in many cases, you're going to want to put it into a new worksheet to give yourself the maximum amount of space necessary. Once you've selected where you'd like to place it, go ahead and click OK. Ha! And there it is. We've now imported data from the web. Go ahead and click on any of these cells and you'll notice there's no fancy links, there's no website URL, there's no functions or formulas. It's just numbers, just as if we had typed it in ourselves. This is important to note because this is going to allow us to build functions and formulas on top of this information. For example, let's say I'd like to calculate how much a US dollar would be compared to 10,000 euros. To do that, I'm going to start off with my standard equal sign. Here's my US dollar. So 1 euro is currently worth 1.06 US dollars. So I'm going to click on first the 10,000 euros, and I'm going to then multiply it by 1.06, the US dollar equivalent of 1 euro. And I'm going to press enter to lock it in. There you go. Currently, based on the exchange rates up to the minute, 10,000 euros are currently worth 10,640 US dollars. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up with me here. Once again, the way we got this data was by navigating to the Data tab. Inside the Data tab, we selected Get External Data from the web. We then navigated to the website x-rates.com. From there, we selected the table that contained the data and selected Import. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up with me and go ahead and calculate the remaining values. I'll join you back in just a second. Welcome back. So hopefully you calculated the pounds, Canadian dollar, and Australian dollar conversion in the same manner. simply by typing in the equal sign, selecting the currency on the left, and then multiplying it by its US dollar equivalent. In this case here, currently, the pound, 1 pound, is worth 1.5 US dollars. So I'm going to multiply it by that US equivalent and hit the Enter key. Now, it's great that we were able to pull all this information in, but big deal. We could have just typed this in ourselves. Why is this significant? Well, throughout this entire process, you know what's been happening? The market has been changing. Data has been ebbing and flowing, meaning that these numbers, while they were accurate 2 minutes ago, they might not be accurate anymore. Sometimes they fluctuate by as much as a few cents. So how do we get that information back? Well, fortunately, Excel thought of that. We have the refresh button. Because we pulled this from the web, this is actually still linked to that table, meaning that as I click refresh all, watch carefully. Check it out. If you missed it, pause the video and go back, because quite a few of these numbers increased and decreased by a few tenths of a cent, meaning that these formulas, because they're directly connected with these linked cells, are as accurate as they could possibly be. Pretty cool. Now, that's one way that we can pull in data from external sources. However, there are additional ways. While it's great that we're able to pull from the web, in most cases we're not going to be doing that. Many people, however, pull data in from external reports. For those instances, let's say we'd like to pull in data from another source. Now, I'm going to go ahead and place my cursor here in cell H3. I'd like to pull in data from another Excel workbook that I have. For that, I'm going to have to turn my attention to the Get and Transform tool. I'd like to trigger a new query, meaning that I'd like to pull in data from an external source and manipulate it before I inject it into my workbook. So I'm going to click on this New Query button. And while I can pull it from a file, database, Azure, or other sources, in this case I'm going to pull from file and more specifically from another workbook. Go ahead and find the New Query from File from Workbook button and give it a click. You're going to get this little box open, and it looks like you're just opening a file, but not quite. Now, in your practice work files, you'll have a file called Global Wine Sales. Go ahead and find that Global Wine Sales file and click Import. Once it establishes a connection with that workbook, you're going to get this pop-up, the Navigator view. The Navigator view will show you all the different sheets inside that work file. In this case, globalwinesales.xlsx only has one sheet in it, Global Wine Sales Week Ending 11-21. By clicking on that sheet, I'll get a live preview of what that table looks like, and there's a lot of data in here. I don't need all of that. All I really need is the country information so that I know what currency to calculate, and the sales information so I know how much of it there is to calculate. So if I don't want all of it, this is where the power of queries comes into play. I'm going to click Edit. Upon clicking Edit, you're going to get the Query Editor view. Now, this can get really complicated, so we're going to keep it simple. I'd simply like to choose the columns that I'd like to import. Having selected Choose Columns, I'm now going to deselect all and only select what I'd like to import. In this case, Country and Sales. And I'm going to click OK. This is what I'm importing now. 2 columns, 305 rows of sales data. Once you've gotten everything down that you want, and of course there are quite a few options available here, go ahead and find Close and Load, but don't just click Close and Load. Choose the drop-down arrow, and we're going to specifically choose where we're going to load it to. In this case here, we'd like to import this as a table. And instead of importing it into a new worksheet, which honestly generally I'll recommend, we're going to import it into an existing worksheet where we have currently selected cell H3. Once you've done all that, go ahead and click Load. And there you go. Check it out. It's actually pulled in all of that data, formatted as a table now. How cool is that? So now I can use this reference data imported from the web to calculate what each of these values would be in US dollars. Not bad. So those are two easy examples of importing data from external sources. Now, of course, you can always go through the old-fashioned way of copy and paste, but know that there are other options available that can automate these processes for you. Go ahead and take this opportunity to re-review the video if necessary, because I know these steps can be a little complex sometimes. And then come back. Once again, remember that all the tools we used are in the Data tab, either in Get External Data, for simplified sources like Access databases and the web, or the New Query for more detailed requests. Go ahead and try that, catch up with me, and come back. Now, we saw that it's pretty easy to pull in data from external sources. I'd also like to point out very briefly that it's just as easy to export. Now, exporting has this complicated naming scheme, but it's actually just taking data that already exists and packaging it in a way that's easier to read for other databases or programs. To export data in any way, simply dive into the File tab, where you'll gain access to the Export tool. One of the most common export features is exporting as a PDF. This allows you to share this document with anybody. It preserves the layout and formatting so that it can be easily readable on any screen, whether it's a web browser or a program here on the computer. Now, of course, exporting as a PDF is only one of a number of different options. If you'd like to export as anything else, simply click Change File Type. You'll be provided with a series of other options, whether it's older versions of Excel, 97 to 2003, a spreadsheet using the standardized open document formatting, a template, which we've talked about earlier, or other file types, like text or CSV. Keep in mind that these are just limited options as well. You can view all the other file types available by going to the Save As menu and scrolling through the Save As Type options. Feel free to take this opportunity now to explore some of the Save As types. And then come back. There's a lot to be said about the tools available inside of Excel that allow us to analyze mass sets of data. For example, we're looking at fiscal years 2013 and 2014 sales data for this creamery company. And there's a lot of questions that we can ask. For example, how much did we sell in fiscal year 2013? How much did we sell in the North region versus the Central or the West? How much did Bishop sell compared to Pullen? All these questions and more are inside the dataset. But the way in which we answer these questions can be tedious, overwhelming even, depending on how we come at this with the tools we already have available. Even more so when the questions get even more complex. How much did we sell in frozen yogurt in March of 2014? How much more did we sell in the Central region in 2013 than we did in 2014? How are we doing year over year in Q3 sales? All these questions and more can be answered if we know where to look. We need some way of taking this data and pivoting it to build around a central question. So this is where pivot tables come into effect. Pivot tables are these fantastic tools that allow us to essentially take all of this data, pour it into a blender, and distill it down into just the core data elements that we need to answer specific questions. So let's build one out and see what that looks like. To navigate to the pivot table tools, we're going to need to jump into the Insert tab. Inside the Insert tab, we've already talked about tables, but we haven't talked about these two tools. Now, recommended pivot tables are simply going to analyze the data that we already have and try to guess how we might pivot this data. Instead of going through that process, we're going to simply just build it for ourselves. Ensure your cursor is somewhere inside the dataset, and find the Pivot Table button and give it a click. Instantly, all of the data is highlighted, once again because this is a well-formed list. Notice that it says select a table or range, and it's already filled all that out for us. All we have to answer is where do we want to put it? In a new worksheet or an existing worksheet? In most cases, you're going to want to put this pivot table, and any pivot table, into a new worksheet so you have the maximum amount of space to work with. Once you've verified all this data, go ahead and click OK. Oh no, and we've lost all of our data. It's gone. Is it gone? Not particularly. In fact, it's important to note that when we're working with pivot tables, to always be aware of what sheet you're currently in. When we created this pivot table, it dropped us into a new worksheet, just like we asked. For posterity's sake, we're going to rename this sheet to Ice Cream Pivot, just so we don't get lost. Now, this is where we lose people almost immediately, because this screen is unlike any other view inside of Microsoft Office. There is no screen quite like this view, and this is why it's so scary. But don't worry. On the right-hand side, we've got pivot table fields. Each of these checkboxes, month, year, type, salesperson, are representative of columns from the worksheet we were just in. Month, year, type, salesperson, and so on. However, these aren't just names. These are representational of the data inside those columns. So month isn't just month. Month enumerates all of the month values in the entire column. So it's important to keep that in mind as we go along. Underneath these fields, we have the field quadrants, filters, columns, rows, and values. We need at least 2 of these in order to build a table. One of those must be the values, and the other must be either a row or column. Now, let's go ahead and dial back to the original question here. How much did we sell in fiscal year 2013? If we were going to build a table that answered the question of how much we sold in any particular year, what would the rows of that table be? If you're saying that each individual row would represent a year, I'd agree with you. So let's find the field that contains the year values. Any guesses which of these contains the year value? If you're ever not sure, of course, you can always dive back to the original dataset, and we can see here that the year column contains all of our year references. So let's find that year field value, and yes, I know there are checkboxes here, but instead of using the checkbox, simply hover over the year value field until you get that 4-corner arrow. Once you've got that highlighted, simply click and hold, and then drag into the field quadrant that you'd like to implement year in. Do we want the years to be the column values or the row values? In this case, we're going to do rows. So I'm going to bring it into the rows quadrant and release. And just like that, it's taken all of the unique values from the year column and it's distilled them into their own rows. Pretty cool. And just like that, we've already got the skeleton of our pivot table. All we're really missing is sales. We need to find out how much we sold in this year versus this year. So which of these field lists contained my sales data? Easy question. Our sales field list did. So where are we going to put our sales list? Are we going to also make it part of the rows? Are we filtering by it? Is it going to be a column-based value? Or is it the values, the meat of our data table? In this case, sales is the substance, it's our meat. So we want to make sure that that goes into the values field. Go ahead and click and drag sales down into the values quadrant and release. And just like that, we've answered the question of how much we sold in fiscal year 2013 versus 2014. It was that easy. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up. Once again, the way we created this pivot table was by placing our cursor anywhere inside the dataset. From here, we navigated to the Insert tab and selected Pivot Table. Once we verified that all the data was highlighted, we made sure that it was being put into a new worksheet and clicked OK. Once inside the new worksheet, we added the year value field to the rows quadrant, giving us our individual yearly rows. Once we had built the structure of that table, all we needed was the meat, the main substance of our table. That was our sales, so we clicked and dragged sales and added it to the values quadrant. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up, and then come back. Welcome back. So congratulations, you've built your first pivot table. Was it that hard? No. And in fact, the general consensus is that pivot tables are one of the easiest to use tools inside of Microsoft Excel. They just have an incredibly steep learning curve. Now, let's get back to this topic at hand here. Fiscal years 2013 versus 2014. Something's bothering me about this, and hopefully it's bothering you too. What is it? The formatting is off. Where's my dollar signs? Despite the fact that my pivot table sales column did have dollar signs, the actual pivoted data does not. So we're going to need to implement this ourselves. Now, having said that, I'm sure that you are well aware about how to implement number formatting. By right-clicking on a cell, you go to Format Cells, right? And then Currency. Sure, we all know how to do that. But in pivot tables, that's not quite how it works. While it does do exactly what you want it to do, there's a better way, there's a more efficient way. Instead of right-clicking on the cell and going to Format Cells, we're going to leapfrog that and go into an option that's only available from the right-click menu inside of a pivot table, the Number Format button. Go ahead and find Number Format and give it a click. This is going to leapfrog you directly into the Number Format Cells box. It looks the same, but it acts a little differently upon execution. Go ahead and select Currency and click OK. Not only did it change the cell that we were currently in, but it changed all the other cells as well. This is something that's unique to pivot tables. By changing one cell using the number format option, it changes all of the cells in the same field. In this case, all of these numbers came from the sales quadrant. So by changing one, we changed all. Now that we've kind of fixed that up a little bit, let's see what other kind of questions we can ask. Let's say, for example, we'd like to ask the question, not just how well we're doing in each particular year, but how well we're doing in each region in each particular year. Now, where are we going to get our region sales data from? If you said the region column, you'd absolutely be right. So let's go ahead and find the region field and click and drag it to the columns quadrant. And release. Just like that, we're now answering an even more complex question. Not just how well did we do in 2013 versus 2014, although those answers are still here. We're now answering the question, how well did we do in each year, in each region? So now, just like that, I can answer the question how well we did in the North region in 2014 versus 2013. Just like I can ask the question, how well did I do in the Central region in each particular year, and see that there's near $100,000 difference. That's pretty substantial. Now, we added the region to the columns quadrant, but what would have happened if I had added it to the rows quadrant instead? Can I do that? Can I have multiple values inside the same quadrant? The answer is yeah, you absolutely can. Go ahead and click and drag region into the rows quadrant and release. And check it out. Look how easy to read this is. We're now answering the question of how well in each year did we do in each region. While we still have our subtotals up at the top answering the question of how well we did in one particular year, we also answer the question in each region in each particular year. Now, what would have happened if we had inverted this? What if we put year below region? Let's go ahead and do that. Click and drag year and bring it below the region quadrant and release. Instantly, we've changed the question that we're answering. We're no longer answering in each year, how well did we do in each region? We're now answering the question of in each region, how well did we do in each year? It's all about focus and perspective. You can see how easy it is to pivot this data simply by clicking and dragging. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up. Once again, we added region to the mix, first into columns, and then we tried it in the rows quadrant, both above and below the year value field. Go ahead and try that for yourself and see what feels best to you. What answers the question best? All right. So we've experimented with adding additional values to this pivot table field. Let's go ahead and keep piling on. Let's say I'd like to add salesperson to the mix. I'm going to click and drag salesperson into the columns field. And now I'm answering the question, not just how well we did in each region in each year, but how well each individual salesperson did in each region in each year. It's amazing how much detail we can pull out of this. So now I can see here that in 2013 in the North region, Watson put up $51,000, but in 2014 he put up $77,000. That's a pretty substantial jump. Consequently, I can also look at still just Bishop in the Central region, or the North, or the West. Now, I'm noticing here that there's a huge outlier. Bishop did all right in the Central and North region, but did a massive number of sales in the West region. Let's say I'd like to see where all of that money came from. Now, how do I get all the information from just this? I just want to see all of the sales of Bishop in the West region for both years. To get that information, I'm going to simply double-click on that cell, or right-click and select Show Details. Welcome to Drill Down Reports. By double-clicking on a single cell, you are going to field every single record that goes into that number. It's going to distill all of that information into a brand new worksheet formatted as a table. This table is now ready for export, either as a PDF, email attachment, or using the Export Table Data button to SharePoint or Visio. How incredibly easy is that? This is bar none one of the most powerful tools available inside of Excel pivot tables. Once again, let's say I'd like to find all of the sales records of Watson in the North region in 2013. Simply find that cell and double-click, and there you go. I now have every single sales record of Watson in the North region in 2013, all in one easy-to-read table. Pretty cool. Go ahead and try that for yourself. Build out a drill down report of information that you'd like to see more data on. All right. Hopefully you're starting to see now that pivot tables are an incredibly powerful tool when it comes to analyzing mass sets of data. Remember, we're answering all of these questions using data from this. That's pretty incredible, and it's insanely easy. Let's simplify things just a little bit here for just a moment. Let's pull everything out. To remove a value field, simply uncheck the box. In this case, we're going to uncheck salesperson, region, and year. We should only have sales checked inside the values quadrant. What I'd like to do now is add month to the rows quadrant and year to the columns value. So now we're looking at trending information from 2013, January through December, and 2014, January through December. In previous lessons, we ran into this issue before, where when we're trying to view and visualize trending information, we find it difficult because numbers inherently are very difficult to process when there's a lot of them. So what tools do we have available that will allow us to analyze this data in real time without having to really squint at all the numbers? Well, charts. Charts are a great way of visualizing data, aren't they? To work with charts, we're going to need to dive into the Pivot Table Tools tab. So go ahead and find the Pivot Table Tools Analyze tab. This is where you're going to have access to all these different options that allow you to control and analyze and work with pivot tables. In particular, the one I'd like to focus on, pivot charts. You see, regular charts don't play nicely with pivot tables, because pivot tables are designed to expand and contract and add information and remove it, all at the click and drag of a mouse. Charts weren't designed to handle that kind of moving dynamic data. So Microsoft had to go back to the drawing boards and build pivot charts. Charts that are designed to work and ebb and flow with pivot table data. Go ahead and find the Pivot Charts button here in the Analyze tab and give it a click. You'll see a view that looks just like the Insert Chart view available inside of the Insert tab. This time we're going to go ahead and build just a line graph. So I'm going to give that a click and click OK. There you go. I've got a chart now. And I have the same flexibility with charts, with one exception. You'll notice that I don't have a filter button this time around. Don't worry, we'll find out why that's the case, but it's important to note that you can't filter directly inside the chart using that button. However, as I'm looking at this chart, there's something visually different about this chart that I didn't see in my last style of chart. For example, let's say year. It looks like there's a little drop-down arrow here, almost like a filter drop-down arrow. So in pivot charts, you can actually filter the data using the same classic filter drop-down arrow you use inside of regular tables. So let's go ahead and filter out 2013, for example, and click OK. Just like that, our chart changed. Notice we're now only visualizing 2014's trending data. And you might have been focused on this, so you probably didn't notice. But look at our pivot table. Where's 2013? Pivot tables and pivot charts are tight at the hip. Change one, and the other immediately reacts. This is incredibly powerful and really intuitive. You don't have to keep track of whether or not one is matching the other. They will always match. Let's go ahead and clear that filtering out. Simply click on the dropdown once again and select Clear Filter from Year. Now, of course, you have the flexibility to filter by month as well. But in this case here, instead of filtering by month individually, maybe I'd like to use the label filters to find all data that is between a certain field of data. But even that feels like a bit much. Wouldn't it be nice if I could maybe group all of this into quarters? Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? Well, as it turns out, you can do exactly that. Go ahead and place your cursor anywhere inside the row labels. Just click on any of the months. Inside the Analyze tab, find the Group Selection button. Grouping is an incredibly powerful tool inside of pivot tables that allows you to link data together into this own cup of information. Now, many businesses like to organize their fiscal year into quarters, so maybe we'd like to also do that. Click and drag to select January through March, and then navigate to the Analyze tab. find the Group Selection button and give it a click. Once again, ensure that you've got only January, February, and March selected. Instantly, once you group January, February, and March together, every other individual month gets its own group. So let's go through and select April, May, and June, and select Group Selection. Go ahead and do that for the remaining 6, July, August, and September, and then highlighting October, November, and December. Lastly, select Group Selection. Now, by grouping these together, we created a whole new field list called Month 2. This is now a detailed view grouping all of these months together. Now, Group 1 through 4 isn't necessarily the most intuitive name. So let's say we'd like to change that. Simply click on Group 1, and we'll change that to Q1 simply by typing. Go ahead and do that for the remaining values. Simply place your active cell over the group name and start typing. So Group 3 becomes Q3, and Group 4 becomes Q4. How easy was that? Grouping is fantastic, and now, because it's grouped, I can actually collapse these values by using the Expand and Collapse button on the left, or, alternatively, I can pull month out of the rows quadrant completely, because remember, month 2 is just the grouped value of those months. So let's go ahead and pull month out. Now, we saw that we can deselect month using the checkbox, but you can also click and drag month out. Notice that we've got a little X in the bottom right corner, and release to remove those values. So now we've got a simplified dataset and chart, visualizing quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Not bad. Go ahead and take this opportunity to catch up. At this stage here, what we've done is we've grouped each of the 3 months into quarters using the Group Selection tool. So go ahead and take this opportunity to group all of those months together into quarters, and then come back. Welcome back. So we've simplified our data sets, but now it's kind of at the expense of our chart. Because there's only 4 data points, the trending data is less significant. So let's change this chart to something a bit more visually stimulating. Click on the chart, and you'll notice that we now have access to Pivot Chart Tools. Just like when we were working with charts, when we clicked it on the chart, we gained access to Chart Tools. Pivot Chart Tools give us access to a series of options. Analyze, giving us access to some standard pivot table tools. And Design, just like with Chart Tools, gives us access to certain design elements within that. In particular, the ability to change the chart type. So maybe we'd like to change the chart type to, how about a column chart? Let's go ahead and select a column chart and click OK. That feels better. So now at this point, we've built a pivot chart. We've built a pivot table that directly ties to the pivot chart. And we've seen that we were able to, within the chart, filter for specific values and view exactly those. So if I deselect 2013, I can see just 2014's sales data. And if I'd like to compare, let's say, Q1 to Q4, I can use these drop-down arrows to deselect all of those values that are not Q1 and Q4. And you can see how easy it is. The table changes, and so does the chart. Now, here's the problem with that. Let's go ahead and clear those filters simply by going to the Data tab. Ensure your cursor is inside the pivot table for this, and click Clear. So we've cleared all the filtering. Here's my problem, and potentially your problem too, with these drop-down arrows. Is anyone outside of yourself going to know that these filter arrows are here? No, probably not. So let's turn our attention to 2 additional options that we have to filter this data. We have the Filters quadrant, Let's say that we'd like to filter this data based on year. Can we also have year inside the filters quadrant, even if it's inside the columns quadrant? Yeah, absolutely. Click and drag year into the filters quadrant and release. And you'll see here, up in the top left, it actually removes it from the columns field, and now I can filter to cycle between 2013 or 2014. But even this isn't the most intuitive. In fact, again, if anybody other than yourself tries to use this and they've never used pivot tables before, they're probably not going to know that these are filter drop-down arrows. So let's go ahead and move year back to the columns quadrant. So it seems like filtering as a whole is very unintuitive to the outside user. But the whole point of pivot tables and pivot charts is to present this data in an easily readable, data analyzed format. But if I can't get people to work with the data, what's the point? I'd like to introduce one more tool to you that is, I think, one of the coolest tools available inside of Excel. Go ahead and place your cursor anywhere inside the pivot table and find the Analyze tab. Inside the Analyze tab, I'd like to introduce a tool to you called the Slicer. Go ahead and click Insert Slicer, and you'll be presented with the exact same field lists that are available inside pivot table fields. And it's not more of the same, I promise. Go ahead and check, let's say month 2, and click OK. If you'll remember, month 2 is our quarterly setup. Look at this. What's going on here? I'm going to go ahead and click on quarter 1 and watch what happens. Boom. Look at that. By clicking on individual buttons here, I am now filtering in real time. Slicers slice the data based on your click and what field lists are available. What's that? You'd like to select multiple values? Okay, turn on the checkbox here on the left. And now I can select multiple values, or deselect them. If I'd like to filter one quarter at a time, simply uncheck the box. Boom. Not bad. To clear the filtering, simply click this button on the top left corner, and it removes all filtering. Now, I'm not in love with the fact that it says month 2, so let's fix that. By clicking on the slicer, we'll now gain access to Slicer Tools, where we can change what the caption says. Currently, the caption says month 2, but maybe I'd like to have it say, click here to filter by quarter. Enter to lock it in, and there it is. Even I couldn't mess this up now. Pretty cool. Now, how many slicers can a dataset have? The answer is as many data points as there are to slice. In fact, you can even filter based on fields that aren't even inside the pivot table. For example, maybe I'd like to insert a slicer, once again from the Analyze tab, based on the type of ice cream. And I'm going to click OK. Here's yet another slicer. Maybe now I'd like to view quarter 1 sales of frozen yogurt. So now I'm viewing not only quarter 1 sales of frozen yogurt, but I'm viewing it in 2013 versus 2014. And I'm getting the grand total of that. Slicers are an incredibly powerful tool that allows you to rapidly manipulate data without having to think at all. Everybody knows how to use a button. Go ahead and take this opportunity to explore the Slicer tool a little bit more so. While filtering is a great way to use this tool, it can also be used to ask more complex questions. So go ahead and take this opportunity to try this out for yourself, and then come back. Welcome back. So let's take this opportunity to shift gears a little bit. Up until this point, we've been talking about working with existing data, whether it was existing data from external sources or existing data from within our own database. Let's talk about inserting content into Excel. What can you put into a cell? Anything. That's kind of the magic of Excel, is you can type anything into these cells and then do something with it. That's pretty powerful. Unfortunately, it's occasionally too powerful. There are going to be plenty of instances where you'd like to contain what people can and can't put inside of a particular cell. For example, in this data set right here, in the phone column, we probably don't want people to be able to just type anything into the phone column. We probably want just numbers. And on top of that, we probably don't just want one number or two numbers. We probably want at least 7, right? Much in the same way that we also probably don't want people to be able to type email addresses into the sales rep column or just make up a name. In these instances, while it's great that Excel allows us to put anything into a cell, in these instances, it can actually be a detriment. So how do we rein people in? How do we contain what it is they can and can't do? Well, in those instances, it would be nice if we could validate what data does and doesn't go into these cells. Fortunately, we do have access to a tool ever so conveniently called data validation. This can be found inside the Data tab. Go ahead and navigate to the Data tab and find the data validation tool. Let's say that we'd like to implement data validation on the phone column. We'd like to say, hey, first of all, only numbers can go into this column. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, in order to affect this entire column, we're going to need to select it first. Remember, we have to select to affect. So I'm going to highlight everything inside the phone column, and I'm going to select the data validation button. Having selected the data validation button, you're going to get this pop-up box. The first thing it's asking for is validation criteria. What do we want to allow? By default, it says any value, which of course it does. That's Excel. Anything can go into a cell. But if we click on the drop-down, we can actually restrict it to a number of different options: whole number, decimal-based values, choose from a list, dates, times. In this case here, let's restrict it to text length or whole number. Really, it depends on how you'd like to come at this. If you'd like to restrict it so that it's only numerical, you could use the whole number value. Consequently, if you'd like to restrict the number of characters that go inside the cell, you can use text length. In this case, let's restrict the number of characters that can go in with text length. By selecting text length, it opens up a number of different options beyond that. The data allows for between, less than, greater than, and all these numbers in between. In this case, we'd like to restrict it so that the minimum number of characters allowed is the smallest possible real phone number. We know that a standard phone number without an area code is 7 digits long. Accounting for a hyphen, that would mean that at a minimum, we should be looking at 7 to 8 characters. So in this case here, let's say the minimum will be 7. Now what about the maximum? Well, the maximum, let's find out how many characters go into a phone number at a maximum if we include every single character. If we include the open parentheses and the closed parentheses of an area code, that's 5 digits alone for the area code. Let's account for a space between the area code and the phone number, that's 6, and then account for 8 additional numbers. So 6 plus 8, we're talking 14, at a maximum 14 characters. This will allow for a fully formatted area code and phone number, including all parentheses and hyphens. Having set the validation criteria, let's go ahead and take a look at the input message. While it's great that we're able to implement these restrictions, in most instances, people aren't going to know that there's a restriction. So let's give them a message that explains to them what's going on. At the very top here, it says show input message when cell is selected, meaning when you click on the cell to start typing, you'll get a little pop-up. What will that pop-up say? How about something simple like instructions? What will the input message say? Please input a valid phone number. And then maybe in parentheses I'll put minimum 7 digits, maximum 14. So let's go ahead and review instructions. Please input a valid phone number with a minimum of 7 digits, maximum of 14. Okay, cool. So we've got instructions. And while instructions are great, there are still going to be those mavericks out there who don't play by the rules, who say, no, I appreciate that instructions, but I'm going to go my own way. And for those people, we have the error alert. So let's navigate to the very last tab here. The error alert tab, indicating that when somebody follows the instructions incompletely and goes against the validation criteria, it will show an error alert. Now there's 3 styles of error alert: stop, warning, and information. It's important to note that the only one that actually prevents information from being entered into a validated cell is stop. Warning and information will still give you an error, but it will allow you to input values that go against the validation criteria. So in most instances, you're going to want to use stop. The next thing it's going to ask for is the title. What do you want the title of the error box to say? In most instances, I'll do something computery, like invalid entry. And the error message something to the effect of, please review the instructions and try again. However, you can put whatever you want in there. It could say, hey dummy, try again. Be careful with what you put into these boxes. And don't you dare point at this video and say, well, the instructor said that I can put hey dummy, because I'll deny everything. So once you've got instructions and an error alert and data validation, all we've got to do is click OK to lock it in. And check it out. By clicking on any cell in the phone column, I can now see instructions telling me, hey, please input a valid phone number, minimum 7 digits, maximum 14. So I'll go ahead and put in a number 555-1423. Cool, there it is. So that worked out all right. But let's say I try something else, like 555, and I'll just hit enter here. Whoop, check it out. Invalid entry. Please review the instructions and try again. This looks pretty convincing, doesn't it? So this is where you have the upper hand, because you control what the message says. If you know what the common mistakes are going to be, you can put that information either in the instructions or in the error alert box. This allows you to control the message. Now, of course, it's not going to let me leave this box until I either click retry and follow the instructions, or delete the box entirely and get away. So keep that in mind as we're going throughout this process. Go ahead and pause the video and try that for yourself. Once again, the way we got to this was by highlighting the entire phone column and selecting data validation. Inside data validation, we chose text length between 7 and 14 characters. We set an input message, we set an error alert, and we clicked OK to lock it in. Go ahead and play with that, and then come back. Welcome back. So let's try with another column here. This time, the sales rep. Now, it would be nice if instead of just giving people the ability to type, for people to misspell things or make up names, maybe we'd like to restrict this value to a drop-down list, meaning that they can't possibly mess it up because they can't type. Once again, let's highlight the entire column that we'd like to change. And let's jump into data validation. Inside data validation, we have the same series of options available. Our validation criteria, in this case by default, yet again, it's allowing any value. We'd like to change that. This time, we'd like to have them choose from a list. So find list and give it a click. The next thing it's asking for is source. Where are the names that you'd like us to choose from? Conveniently, they've been placed off to the right here. So I'm going to click and drag to select Jack Tate through Wendy Sue. H6 through H9. Notice they're absolute referenced. This is important. Don't take those away. We've talked about input message and error alert. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like when we don't put anything in. So we've got our validation criteria to choose from a list. whether it's the name of the salespeople, or if you'd like, you can always do the abbreviated versions. And let's click OK. And just like that, we've now created data validation for the sales rep column. If you click on any one of these cells, you'll notice there's no instructions because we didn't type any instructions. If I click on the drop-down arrow, I see a list of the available individuals here. Look how easy that is. Now, while that's great, let's see what happens if I try to start typing. In this case, let's say I try to add me. I'm going to go ahead and tap enter, and here's the default error alert. The value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So it's actually going to call out that there are data validation restrictions. Depending on whether or not that's what you want, you might want to say something a little bit different. You might want to control that error alert message. Let's go ahead and set a credit limit. Once again, let's go ahead and highlight everything. Actually, better yet, let me show you another way to do this. Let's do it with just one cell this time. Go ahead and click on credit limit, and let's select data validation. We're going to go ahead and restrict it to a whole number. And let's say that the credit limit can't exceed 5,000. So our whole number will be less than or equal to 5,000. Once again, you can control the input message and error alert. So allow a whole number less than or equal to 5,000, and I'm going to click OK. Now, I've implemented data validation in this one cell. However, I didn't apply it to the cells beneath. So how do I fix that? Well, as it turns out, data validation is autofillable. So I'm going to take this cell that I've already implemented data validation on, and I'm going to autofill it down. Now, I can type anything inside these cells, like 5,500, and you'll see that data validation now applies. So data validation is autofillable. Once again, the way we did that was by implementing data validation on just this one cell, and then we autofilled down. Now you'll notice that it also took away those borders a little bit. If you don't want that, you can always click on this button right here, Autofill Options, to fill without formatting. Meaning that it'll autofill the existing value hidden behind the cell without changing the formatting. And there you go. Lastly, let's go ahead and implement date acquired. Once again, highlighting everything inside the date acquired, let's implement data validation. We'll allow for a date, and let's say this date can't be in the future. So it must be less than or equal to today's date. But here's the problem. If I just type in today's date, which is currently for me, November 24th, 2015, tomorrow, when I open up this file, I won't be able to put in tomorrow's date because the end date will have been today instead of tomorrow. I know this is getting a little deep here, but what we need to do is tell Excel to auto-update the end date to correspond with whatever today's current date is. To do that, we're going to need a function. Not just any function, the equals today function with an open-close parentheses. This tells Excel whatever today is, according to the computer's internal clock, is the end date. So allow a date that is less than or equal to today, meaning that no day can be put in here that is in the future, no matter what day it is. So let's go ahead and click OK and see what that does for us. So I'm going to go ahead and type in today's date, 11/24/15. Boom. All right. What about tomorrow, 11/25? No dice. The data validation is linked to whatever the internal clock says. The internal clock says it's the 24th. Therefore, the date acquired cannot be anything later than that. Go ahead and take this opportunity to fill out the remaining columns. So we've got phone, sales rep, credit limit, and date acquired. Go ahead and pause the video and complete the rest of that, and then come back. All right. So we've implemented data validation for this entire worksheet. And that's really all there is to be said about data validation. But keeping on the trend of containing people, not just yourself, but others who might be using this worksheet, let's take a look. As we're looking at this worksheet here, there's really only a limited subset of fields that we'd like people to be able to actually edit data in. In particular, pretty much just these fields right here. We don't want them to be able to change the customer number or the contact name or the salespeople's names. Really, we don't need them to have access to any of these other blank cells. We've implemented data validation here, so let's corral them into just these cells, meaning they can only make changes here. Some of you may be aware that in the Review tab, we have access to some protection tools, in particular protecting sheets and workbooks. However, by themselves, these tools just kind of do that. So if I go ahead and click on Protect Sheet, for example, go ahead and dive into the Review tab with me, and select Protect Sheet. It'll ask for a password. If you should choose to use a password for this practice lesson, I do encourage 1234. There's nothing more embarrassing than locking yourself out of a file during a digital session. So in this case, my password is going to be 1234. And I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me to verify. And so now I've got sheet protection on. Notice it now says unprotect sheet. So let me try and edit some stuff inside these cells right here. I'm going to insert a phone number. And as soon as I type anything, I get this pop-up. Hey, the cell or chart you're trying to change is on a protected sheet. To make a change, I've got to unprotect the sheet. But this kind of goes against what I was trying to do. I wanted to lock the sheet, yes, but I didn't want to lock all of it. There's no button up here that says protect some of the sheet. But there is a way to unlock certain cells, making them immune to the protect sheet tool. Let's go ahead and unprotect sheet here. It's going to ask you for the password, which is hopefully 1234. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to tell Excel, hey, these cells, no matter what the protect sheet status is, should be editable. They should always be unlocked. So once again, we've got a select to effect. So go ahead and highlight everything and give it a right click. We're going to go into the Format Cells option. Find the Format Cells option, and you're going to need to navigate to the Protection tab. It's funny how long this tab has been here, and yet because we weren't looking for it, many of us have never seen it. But here in the Protection tab, there's only two checkboxes, Locked and Hidden. Locked is currently checked, indicating that when we protect the sheet, these cells lock. However, if we were to uncheck this box, we are now saying, even when the sheet's protected, these cells will not be locked. So let's click OK. And let's try it again. Once again, the way we did that was by highlighting all of the fields that we wanted to unlock, right-clicking, and selecting Format Cells, and then in the Protection tab, unchecking the Locked checkbox. Let's now protect our sheet. Once again, my password will be 1234. I will confirm. So now my sheet is locked. Notice it says unprotect sheet. And if I go into any of these other cells and I start typing, hey, the cell that you're trying to change is on a protected sheet. To make a change, unprotect the sheet. But I'd like to go ahead and insert a phone number. So here we go, moment of truth. Oh, there it is. Check it out. Because we unlocked these sheets, even though we're currently inside of a protected sheet tool, all of these cells are editable within reason. Remember, we implemented data validation. So we have actually corralled people into this limited collection of cells. They can't change anything else. They can't change the names. They can't change the employee numbers. All they can do is change these cells, which have in and of themselves their own restrictions. Pretty cool. So you can actually build forms out with no fear about people making edits or changes to your formulas or functions, if you implement data validation and then restrict only the input cells to be editable, and then protect the sheet, you've got nothing to worry about. You have ultimate control over the spreadsheet. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try this for yourself. And when you're done, remember to unprotect the sheet simply by clicking and typing in the password. Go ahead and pause the video and try that for yourself. Welcome back. So we've unprotected the sheet. You should see protect sheet and protect workbook, not unprotect sheet. Now, many people are under the impression that if you want to lock the entire file, you use protect workbook. However, that's not the case. Protect workbook does not do what you think it does. It only locks the structure of the workbook, meaning that I can't move my tab from one place to another or rename the tabs or anything like that. For those of you that are looking for file protection, that's actually going to be inside the File tab. Makes sense, doesn't it? Go ahead and dive into the File tab. And you'll notice right at the very top, we have Protect Workbook. Go ahead and click on the Protect Workbook dropdown, and you'll see that we actually have the ability to protect the current sheet, just like we did earlier. Protect the workbook structure. See, I told you that's not what you thought it was. Here's what you want. You want to encrypt this file with a password. By clicking on this, it's going to ask for a password. Now, it's important to remember that if you lose this password, you're not going to be able to get into this file. So keep that in mind as you're setting the password, which was definitely going to be 1234. I'm going to re-enter my password of 1234. And there you go. Check it out. A password is now required to open this workbook. If I were to go ahead and save this file, and then File Close, I'm now going to go ahead and open up that file again, Excel Day 2 Work Files, and check it out. Hey, it's saying this file's protected. You're going to need a password to get in. Fortunately, I know the password. It's 1234. Don't tell anyone. And I'm going to click OK. And boom. We are now back inside that file. Pretty cool. So there you have it. Locking the sheet allowed us to contain the user into a selected field. Additionally, if you'd like to just keep people out, you see that encrypting the file from the File menu using the Protect Workbook to encrypt with a password allowed us to do exactly that. If you'd like to remove it, simply type in the password again and click OK. Go ahead and pause the video and try that for yourself. We've gotten a lot of exposure to a lot of really amazing tools hidden inside of Microsoft Excel. Tools that really people don't even consider being possible. Let's take a look at one more example of tools that exist, but may not necessarily come across people's radar when they're using the program. We're looking at average temperatures inside 5 US cities across 12 months. Now, when I'm looking at this data, as with any data set, there's a lot of questions that can be asked and answered. For example, which month is the hottest? What's the average temperature of all these months? What's the trending information like? With all these questions here, we run into a problem. Let's say that I was to sort the Orlando list to find what the hottest month was. I might be able to do that, and in fact, if I do, I find that October was the hottest month. But now, if I go into Tampa and try to do the same thing, if I try to get all of the US cities to get their hottest temperature on top, I can't do that. The reason being is the hottest month for one city is by no means guaranteed to be the hottest month for any other city. So, as it turns out, sorting might not be the best tool available for this. And I certainly can't filter because that means hiding data that I otherwise need to see to analyze trending information. So if I can't sort and I can't filter, it sounds like I've taken away all the tools I have to analyze this data. That's almost true. But there is one last tool available that allows us to visually distinguish specific information based on certain conditions. For example, in Orlando here, Go ahead and highlight everything from January in Orlando down to December. What I'd like to do is, based on certain conditions, highlight what the hottest and coldest temperatures were in this time. To do that, I'm going to need conditional formatting, which can be found here inside the Home tab. Conditional formatting changes the visual aspect of cells based on certain conditions. Consider it kind of a visual if function for those of you who are familiar with if functions. I'm going to go ahead and click on the drop-down, and you'll see that there's a number of pre-formatted options available. The ability to highlight cells based on certain conditions, to highlight the top and bottom 10% or the above average or below average numbers. I can use data bars. Let's try color scales. Go ahead and hover over that first option in color scales and watch everything change. You get a live preview of what these will look like. And check it out. Based on the data that was highlighted, it found the highest number and assigned it a color. It then took the lowest number and assigned that one a color. All other cells are a gradient in between the highest and the lowest number. Pretty cool. But something's a little off here. What's wrong? Well, the colors are inverted. The lowest temperature is in red and the highest is in green. It feels a little counterintuitive, so let's try a different option to the right, option number 2. And there you go. Go ahead and click to lock that one in. So what was the hottest month in Orlando? 88. It's pretty easy to distinguish that now that there's colors involved. What was the coolest temperature? 65. Not bad. And I can now see the trending information. In the earlier part of the year, it starts off pretty cool. And then in the summer, it starts to heat up. We don't see it start to drop until, really, January. Let's go ahead and try that with Tampa and see what goes on here. Once again, highlight everything you'd like to change, select to effect. And once again, we're going to jump into conditional formatting, color scales, and we're going to choose the second option from the left. Click to lock it in. Boom. There you go. What was the hottest month in Tampa? July by a long shot. And the coldest? March. Pretty easy, right? Conditional formatting allows us to visually distinguish content based on certain conditions. Now, using the color scales option was great, but it was a little pre-formatted. We didn't have a lot of control over that. So let's take a look at Boston here. I live in San Francisco, and I love San Francisco. In fact, I've been here long enough that I'm spoiled by the temperature. The average temperature in San Francisco traditionally doesn't really deviate from between 68 and 72 all year. So let's say that I'd like to identify all the fields in Boston that meet that 68 to 72 happy medium, so that if I go travel to Boston, I don't have to buy a new wardrobe. I'll just travel in those months. So, yet again, we're going to highlight everything in Boston, and we're going to jump into conditional formatting. This time, instead of using the color scales, icon sets, or data bars, which are all pre-formatted options, I'm going to use the highlight cells rule, which is kind of a roll your own, if you will. So how do I identify average temperatures that are between 68 and 72? Well, by using the between option. Go ahead and find between and give it a click. You're going to get this pop-up right here, asking us to format cells that are between, and it asks us to put in the fields. I'm going to type 68 and 72. Now by default, it's going to fill it with light red fill and dark red text. Of course, you don't have to choose that. You can use yellow fill with dark yellow, green fill with dark green. In this case, however, I'd like to build a custom format. So I'm going to click on Custom Format, and you can control pretty much anything about this. You can bold the text. You can change the font color to white. Maybe you want to change the fill color to something exotic like purple. You can even change the number formatting if you want. In this case here, I'm going to leave things as is. Bold, white text, purple fill. And I'm going to click OK. Once I've chosen my custom formatting, I'll click OK to lock it in. And boom, there you go. So really, April is the only month that actually meets my search criteria. Now the cool part about conditional formatting is it's not a one-time shot. So let's say I update this data and, courtesy of global warming, May average temperature spikes to 69 next year. So I update the data and check it out. As soon as the number falls into my search criteria field, the conditional formatting kicks in and auto-formats that cell to match the conditional formatting formats that I set. Pretty cool. Conditional formatting is as powerful as you are creative. So think about where this makes the most sense to you. I've seen incredibly creative usage of this. For example, I know a young lady that's using this to manage contracts. When a contract date comes within 7 days of expiration, the date highlights in red. 20% of her job is just managing those contracts. By using conditional formatting, she's automated 20% of her job. Now all she has to do is see red and call those people to renegotiate the contracts. Pretty cool. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try out a couple of conditional formatting options of your own and see what works well for you. When you're done with that, come back and we'll start again. Welcome back. When we're working inside of Excel, there's a lot of instances where we're not necessarily going to have to go through this whole process of typing out the same value. And in fact, in many instances, formulas and functions that we execute on one sheet, the results we're going to need in another sheet or in another part of the workbook. So it's important to keep in mind that while it's great that we have access to, let's say, copy and paste or the ability to just go and look and type that in where we need it, we don't have to do that. In fact, Excel is incredibly good at mirroring cells, linking content from one cell to another. I'll give you an example. Here, I'd like to link A1's value, and I'd just like to mirror it here. Currently, A1 says, hey, Excel is even better than I expected, and I'm sure that's exactly how you feel. In order to mirror what's happening in cell A1, I'm going to need to tell Excel to start thinking. Of course, I do that the same way I do with everything, an equal sign. From here, all I'm going to do is just take my cursor and click on cell A1. The formula should now say equals A1. Once I've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. And just like that, it's mirrored that cell. If I click on the cell, it doesn't say Excel is better than I expected. It says equals A1. So essentially, whatever A1 says, this cell will also say. So if I click in A1 and I change Excel to Sean and cooler, once I hit enter, instantly, the linked cell also changes. By linking cells, we're able to ensure that the same information is being propagated across the entire workbook, right? Just like when we're building functions and formulas, don't tell Excel what to add, tell Excel where to look to see what to add. So that's linking inside of the same worksheet. But let's say we'd like to link data from another sheet. Well, same deal, we're going to start by typing an equal sign. And let's say I jump over to data validation. And I'd like to link this cell right here, Jack Tate. Now you'll notice in the formula bar currently it says data validation, and then cell H6. Why does it say data validation? Where is it getting that from? Well, that's the name of the worksheet. Excel has to know which H6 we're talking about. How many worksheets have the cell H6? All of them, right? So it has to know which worksheet to look in. So our formula now says equals worksheet data validation, cell H6. Now it's important to note that you don't want to navigate away from this until you hit enter. Notice what happens when I click away. It didn't lock in. And in fact, in many instances, if you click on a cell and then move away, you'll notice that the worksheet changes too. Instead of locking it in, it's just changing the worksheet reference from conditional formatting to linking data to data validation. In order to lock this in, you have to remember to hit enter before you leave the worksheet. So make sure that it says data validation H6, and without leaving the sheet, just hit enter. And just like that, there it is. If I click on the cell, it's referencing the data validation worksheet, cell H6. Because remember, if it said just H6, it would be referencing this blank cell right here. Just like in the previous example, if I change the name, let's say to Jeff Carlton, and hit enter. If I go to the linking data worksheet, it's already automatically updated. I've got one last example here, linking data from another workbook. For this example here, I'm going to need to open up another file. Fortunately, we already have another file available. So I'm going to go ahead and click on File, Open, and I'm going to find that Global Wine Sales worksheet we used from earlier. So go ahead and find that Global Wine Sales worksheet and click Open. Just like that, I've got a second file open. Now, with that having been said now, what I'd like to do is link one of these files, one of these cells, to my Excel Day 2 work files. So just like with every other cell, I'm going to start with an equal sign. I'm now going to go ahead and click on, let's say, John Wade, cell B2. Notice what the formula bar says on both files. globalwinesales.xlsx. So it's specifically referencing this file. From there, it's referencing the Global Wine Sales week ending 11-21. That's the name of the worksheet. And lastly, it's representing cell B2. To lock it in, just like with every other instance, we're going to hit Enter. And there it is. If I click on the cell, there's that very extensive cell link. Now watch what happens when I close this file out. Watch this formula very carefully. Notice it no longer just says globalwinesales.xlsx. It actually has the full file tree format. C drive, users folder, 10-16, desktop, and then global wine sales. This is incredibly important to keep in mind because if you share this file with somebody else, they're not going to have access to that. So if you're going to be linking to an external workbook, please ensure that that workbook can be accessed from a shared drive. That way, when you share this file, it can still pull in the latest information from that data link. Go ahead and take this opportunity to try cell linking for yourself. There are a lot of different uses for it, but it all starts with knowing that the tool exists. Go ahead and pause the video and try this out for yourself. So many amazing tools inside of Excel. Now, when we're working inside of Excel, this entire session up until this point has been focused on what you're doing. We did touch on what it's going to be like when we share this file with somebody else. We talked about how we can use data validation and cell and sheet protection in order to contain people a little bit more so. But sometimes we don't need to have kid gloves on for that. We don't need to put training wheels on these spreadsheets. Especially when we're talking about collaborating inside of a team, restricting values can actually prevent people from doing the job they need to do. In those instances, instead of locking cells, another available option that we can use is the comments feature. This can be found inside the Review tab. Comments allow us to select a certain part of a document and leave notes about it, without actually impacting the actual file. So let's say, for example, here. Howard Smith doesn't make 1125 anymore, and I'd like to leave a note about that. Now, I could send an email with this file to whomever and say, hey, just a heads up, in this file, in the master employee list worksheet, in cell I6, Howard Smith no longer makes 1125. But instead of doing that, instead what I could do is click on cell I6, the value that needs to change, and using the new comment button, click and actually leave a note. Let's say this note is from me, Sean. And I could say, Howard Smith now makes $15 an hour. And notice what happens when I click away. The note is gone, at least as far as you can tell. But if you look at that cell very closely, there's a little red indicator showing that there's a comment here. Now, someone somewhere is laughing about how small that is and thinking to themselves, how will I ever know there's a comment there? The good news is you don't have to know that for sure. In order to see whether or not there are any existing comments, instead of hunting through this entire workbook, you can simply go to the Review tab and do one of two things. You can click Show All Comments, which will make all comments visible automatically, or you can use the Previous and Next button. So if I click on Next, boom, check it out. Here's a comment you didn't even know was in this workbook. We need to fix the initials on this. Jeff's initials are JC, not JT. Oops. Once you've addressed it, you can either edit the comment or delete it, or click Next to just jump to the next one. And as you can see here, there's no more at the end of the workbook, but I can always start from the beginning, just like we did with spell check. And it brings me back to this note right here. Comments are a great way of encouraging collaboration without harming the document. So keep that in mind the next time you need to make references on a specific worksheet or workbook. Comments allow you to specifically communicate about particular areas of a workbook with relative ease. Go ahead and try that out for yourself, and then come back.